Good afternoon. Let's call the forum this afternoon to order. I know a lot of you have questions that you don't want to get to, so we'll try to move along as quickly as we can. On behalf of the Forum Committee, I welcome you to the annual Meet the Candidates Forum. The Forum Committee is an independent group of sea ranchers. We are not part of the association's structure. Our mission is to provide forums about issues and topics of general interest to all sea ranchers. And we think that today's is certainly going to be of interest to all sea ranchers. I'd like to announce the next two forums in May. On May 7th, we will have the new fire district will be here to describe exactly how they're set up and operating and the progress that they've made to date. I think it'll be a very exciting forum for all of us. Then on May 14th, another topic that's of interest to most of us, and that is security in the cyber world. And it will keep us all safe, I think, from all of the things which have been happening with computers. Both cyber and software will be discussed. Today's session is a continuation of the tradition of the Forum Committee of presenting the membership with prospective candidates for membership on the board. It's an opportunity for each of them to introduce themselves to you and to discuss with you their positions on issues that will be facing the next board and explain why each of them merit your support. I'll be moderating today's session. David Goheen will be videotaping the proceedings. Walt Custer is out of town, but when he returns, he will have CDs available in the next few weeks. And last but not least, on behalf of the Forum Committee and all the members present, I would like to thank the candidates for their participation and willingness to stand for the selection and give their time to the benefit of all of us. Today's session will begin with each candidate making a 10-minute statement of their backgrounds and intentions. Following these presentations, members will have an opportunity to question the candidate individually or to question the panel collectively. So as you get up to raise a question, please specify whether you want all of the candidates to answer it or you're directing it to one particular candidate. At the end of the Q&A, each of the candidates will give us a short closing statement of about 2 minutes. Then we will adjourn to the back of the hall where we have cookies and coffee. And we hope that you'll come back and informally meet each other and meet the new candidates and let them know any of your concerns. When we get to the question and answer session where you come up to the mic to present a question, we ask that it be a question. This is not an opportunity for you to make statements and to state your positions. It's for you to understand how the board reacts or how these board candidates react to a particular issue. So please, if I find that somebody is taking over the mic to state their own positions, I will cut you off and ask the candidate to just respond. So the candidates will start. We drew lots to see who would go first. Nigel will be your first presenter, then Jim will be the second, and David will be the third. The order will be reversed of the closing statements. So I would like to now welcome Nigel. And I'm going to sit over here and let him have this, but I'm taking my clock.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I'd like first of all to thank the Forum Committee for giving us all this opportunity to talk to you. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming out and spending some time to come listen. So that said, why am I standing here as a candidate? And I have to say, after some of the excitement of the last couple of months, I've asked myself that a couple of times in the last week or two. But having put my name in the hat a little earlier, to be serious, and it goes back to, I want to tell a short story. When I first met my wife a long time ago through work, we didn't necessarily like each other. as we were sort of getting to know each other, but we did very rapidly find a common bond in that we both did volunteer work for things that got us excited and got our attention that we cared about. And it was from that that we came to realize that there was a lot more going on than just, sort of volunteer sharing. And of course, we've been married for some time now. But it's that same level of engagement in things we care about and things we both love that brings me to be standing here today. Back then it was BMX racing and my kids. Now it's the Sea Ranch, both as a physical place and as a community that I care about. I'm here because I love this place and I want to contribute. It's that simple. It's also somewhat complicated to explain beyond that, but it is that simple. And quite frankly, I'm standing here offering myself to you as a candidate, not with any agenda, but simply because I want to serve this community that I believe in. So why now? We haven't been here that long on the ranch, but when we first moved here, we said, my wife and I said, let's take a year to figure out what we might or might not do, because we realized there are many, many opportunities to get involved at the Sea Ranch. As you all know, there's a committee for everything here. So there's no shortage of opportunity. I must admit I don't do quilting, so that one was off the table. There's lots of other things to do. After the year was up, we sort of looked at each other in the eye and said, okay, now it's for real. And I put my name into the finance committee at the time, was looking for help, and I volunteered for that and got picked for that. And I did that in part because I'd done similar work in the past, both in a volunteer situation, and also in my day job. I'm not a finance guy, but I do a lot of work with money. So volunteered for that, and then after about a year, after people moved around, in fact, the finance committee nominated me to be chair of the committee. And while I was in that role, in fact, because of Robert Scarola's unfortunate need to retire from board activity, I put my name forward to be one of the candidates considered for appointment to the board and got appointed. So I stand here today as a board member who's done a partial term, and I now have the opportunity to run for a full term. So that's kind of why I'm here. A little bit about who I am, and I'm presuming that most of you have read my sort of first statement, but also I'll give you the sort of thumbnail sketch version. Born and brought up in the UK, at the age of 30-something, early 30s, moved to Canada with my then family. Went sight unseen, I had a job offer, took the job, never been to Canada in my life before, just picked up the kids and the wife and the furniture and away we went. It was kind of interesting. Spent 19 years there, and then got sort of offered the opportunity to be part of a technology startup in the Bay Area in the first dot-com bubble. Well, it hadn't burst at that point, it burst about 18 months after I got here. So that was kind of an interesting experience in learning from failure. But so I came to California in the year 2000, and my wife sort of had been visiting up here, renting over 3 years before that. I think the first year I was here, we came up here and rented, and didn't come up every year, but always loved it when we did, and came up for a couple of weeks at a time if we could. And then in 2012 we bought. And I must say, after sort of it's the second best decision I ever made in my life. My dog would argue getting the dog was the best decision. My wife would probably argue it was her, but we'll let them duke that one out. But buying here was certainly the second best decision. So, why would you consider me as a potential candidate? I'm the first to admit, in terms of residency here, I think I'm the newest. I think these guys have been here a lot longer than I have. I don't see that as a handicap. I think I bring a fresh and a new perspective. You come in from outside and see things through a different pair of eyes. I've got plenty of relevant experience. I am on the board currently. I've been on since September of last year. I've served on non-profit boards before for many years, both as an officer and as a board member. And part of that experience was actually getting sued, but that's a whole other story. As a board member, that is. And my business background is in operations and strategy, which a lot of what being a board member here is about. Yes, it's in the context of an HOA, but you know, business problems are business problems, whether it's not-for-profit, whether it's for-profit, or whether it's a common interest development. I certainly feel very strongly about this place, both the place and the people. We came for the place originally, we're now staying for the people, although we like the place too, don't get me wrong. My approach to problems is, I'm an engineer by profession and by nature, so I tend to be sort of problem-solving mode, very pragmatic, sort of fact-based approach to decision-making. I like to do a lot of listening, and then put together what I hear from a whole bunch of people and come up with an approach that sort of captures what I think is the best of everything. I can get things done, I do get things done. As on the finance committee, one of the things that came to me as we were going through the budget cycle and also looking at the 30-year plan we have required to have under the Davis Sterling Act, we had a big hole in our sort of planning horizon. So one of the things that's actually coming to the board for review and adoption in the April meeting, if it gets on the agenda, I'm looking at Jim when I say that, is the 5-year plan, which is meant to be a framework for looking at the bigger issues and the longer term issues that we face as an organisation and as an association. And we did it by engaging all 3 policy committees. It was a working group with 2 members from each policy committee. We worked sort of across all 3 parts of it. And I sort of led putting together the approach and the plan and sort of bringing it to fruition to where it is. Now, it's a living document. I'm sure it'll change. It's the first version of it. I'm sure it'll change. But it's a good start, I believe. And it's the sort of thing I think we, as an association, need to think a little more about, is sort of the longer time horizons. So, that's why me. Let me talk about how I would do things, or how I think about things a little more, my sort of philosophy. And as I say this, I'm going to make this disclaimer. I'm a sitting board member, but things I'm saying standing up here reflect my opinion only. So duly noted, I hope. What drives about how I think? And to me, the primary role, I think, as a board member is about stewardship. We'll talk more about what that means, but stewardship to me is a longer-term horizon. It's about the longer-term issues around our land, our common asset, which is the land we all sort of live amongst. The driving ethos that inspired the Sea Ranch in the first place, the living lightly sort of component. The staff who look after us and maintain our environment for us. Our community, as a community at the Sea Ranch. And when I say that, I don't want to preserve us in a time capsule where we're in a sort of 1950s time warp. We do have to be aware of the greater environment in which we live and operate. But I do believe that part of the stewardship of this community is preserving and protecting a civility and a respect amongst ourselves, that we treat each other that way, and we talk that way to each other when we're debating issues. And those are the sort of primary components I see around stewardship. And it's a long-term play. I mean, you know, we've just celebrated our 50-year anniversary. We want to be able, 50 years from now, to celebrate the 100. And we won't, many of us looking around the room, I doubt if many of us will make it that far, unless there's some huge medical advances. But by the same token, you know, our heirs, our successors, or other people who buy into this community will be there. You know, and I think we owe an obligation to those future generations as well as ourselves to preserve and protect what we have and all those aspects of it. If I get elected to the board, I would try and keep the board to think, you know, it's 7 people and I'm just one, but my objective would be to try and help the board think strategically. When you're facing a lot of issues, and the number of issues that we face as an association varies from day to day, and sometimes you don't see them coming. But It's very easy to deal with tactical stuff, because looking at the short-term tactical issues is kind of easy. You can make a decision, you can get a result. The longer-term, big-picture stuff is a lot harder, and it's therefore sometimes easy to sort of set it aside. Well, you know, the hedgerows will still be there tomorrow, or the forest will still be there tomorrow, we can defer it. And yes, we can, but there's a limit. And we shouldn't be deferring making difficult decisions around those things simply by sort of going after operational issues, which are perhaps better left to staff. So my view is the board needs to focus on guiding the organisation for the long term, and not dealing with sort of the daily tactical stuff.
30 seconds.
Wow, it's going to take that long. Which kind of leads me to one broad concern, which is another sort of overarching theme of mine, is deferred maintenance. You know, it's easy to put off things like replacing hedgerows. I'm very glad this year that we sort of upped the number that we're doing in a year to two sections instead of one. Things of that sort, we need to keep moving on and keep driving on, because one thing's for sure, nature is pretty relentless, you know, and we can only defer these things for so long. I haven't talked a lot about the big issues. I know they're out there, and I'm expecting them to come up through questions. So I will get off my soapbox for the moment and turn it over to the next person. Thank you.
Nigel, thank you, and I think on behalf of all of us, we thank you for stepping in when Robert had to leave the board for medical reasons. Jim is the next. Many of you know Jim from the past. He was on our board several years ago. So Jim Flessner.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out here today. It turned out to be a really nice day, and for you to take the time to come and listen to what we have to say. I wanted to talk a little bit about me and discovering the Sea Ranch. It was a long time ago, back in the early 90s. I got a postcard from Michael Gates. People might remember him. He was a real estate agent here, and he was targeting pilots. And at the time, I had a small plane, and had a picture of the Sea Ranch Airport and said, "Come on up. It's only 50 minutes away." Well, he had a fast plane, I guess, but it was a little longer than that. But it was one Sunday afternoon, my wife and I jumped in a plane, and we came up and tried to find the airport. We ended up north of Guala. And we were about to give up when we turned around and came back, and there it was in front of us. We landed, met Michael, and he took us around and really loved the community. Really loved seeing it was very beautiful, and we came back a couple more times and looked at other places along the coast, but Sea Ranch was by absolutely our first choice. And so we ended up buying a house in '93, and we've been loving it ever since. We called it our paradise. First year, we put it on the rental market and called it Pilot's Paradise. But after the year, we said, we really want to have it for our own. And we took it off the market, and we've been living in it on weekends since then. And since we've been retired, we've been able to spend much more time up here and really enjoying it. But I'll give you a little bit of my background. It's in the first statement, so it might be a little bit repetitive. But my undergraduate degree is in electrical engineering. My work at the Sonoma County Water Agency required me to be a professional engineer, to be registered with the state. I also have an MBA degree, and I've taken telecommunications. I have certificates in telecommunications from UC Berkeley Extension. I've been spending, as part of my work experience, I spent time up here because the group I was in charge of was an electrical group, and we were the ones who maintained all the electrical aspects of the wastewater treatment plants up here and the lift stations. We did the rewiring so that all of the treatment plants could use the same emergency generator when the power went out. as well as the lift stations using the same ones. So I have to spend a couple of sessions up here, and actually I've arranged it so I could spend time up here. I joined the crew and said I was watching them, but I was really just enjoying Sea Ranch. But as part of that, as my time was on there, or my early days here, I had a job which allowed me some spare time, and so I volunteered in '97 for the Finance Committee. And I was on the Finance Committee for 4 years, till 2001, when I was elected to the Board of Directors. And those 3 years on the board were really some of the best times I've had up here. Working with really great people, some of them Sea Ranchers of the Year, and I thought we accomplished a lot of things. And some of the main things were that we annexed the remnant lands as starred comments, and we also annexed the CPZ then at that time. That was in 2002. We did a fuels management program that Pete Matson was in charge of and did a terrific job. If you know Pete, you know that he doesn't waste a lot of time. He doesn't want to go to meetings that last a long time. He wants action, and he did a great job with that. We passed a resolution on the Knipstingle barn, trying to get more control of it from Sonoma County, from their permits and resource management department. And this was some of the beginning of the bluff trail erosion back in the early 2000s. And one thing that I also did was, or I didn't do, but the board did, was to create the dog park. A lot of that work for that dog park was done by people who weren't on committees, who weren't on the board, by Rich and Connie Schimber and some other people on the committee. And it shows what the people in the Sea Ranch can do on their own. It's not that you have to be on a committee or be on the board. That if you've got an issue that something that you want to do and create, that you can do that, and I was really glad to support it on the board. I was on the Utilities Committee then after that for a couple of terms, and then I got called on to the Solar Array Task Force, where we were having to help in the building of the 2 solar arrays that we now have at the Sea Ranch, as well as looking at other solar arrays on our properties here. And then last year, there was an opening on the Finance Committee, and I was able to get back on the Finance Committee. So I've been keeping busy volunteering here, but if I can just make a slight pitch, we do need more people on the Finance Committee, and so if anybody's interested, please talk to me or talk to John Torquist about joining up on it. It's a matter of we're getting people who have been moving on to the board and other people who have had to leave because of health reasons, and so we could use some help with that. Now that my wife and I are both retired, as I said, we're able to spend much more of our time here. The reason that I volunteered for the board was one, because of my past experience on the board. As I said, it was really, I really liked working with other board members and accomplishing things, exchanging ideas, and moving Sea Ranch forward, or at least as we saw. And I think we accomplished that. There's a great, the other things were one of the things that I did learn while being on the board was that you can't always predict what problems are going to come up. When I was elected to the board, we had problems. There was some controversy about the use of the barn, the Knipstingle barn. I couldn't have foreseen that. The bluff erosion I couldn't have foreseen. And I think that's probably true I'm certainly true of what's happened to Nigel and the present board right now with our Central Timber Production Zone. Through all these years, it just didn't come up, didn't seem to be a problem, and then it did become quite controversial. So, just talking about a little bit more about my experience at Sea Ranch, that we all live here because we have a passion for this place, and that even though the community is evolving, we're getting new people in here, and we're creating new friends. And it's sorry to see some of our old friends leave. One of the things, jumping around a little bit, is the fact that by putting in this fiber optic system, we're going to be able to have younger people coming up here able to work from their homes and still enjoy the Sea Ranch. And I think that's something that's very important. So right now it's a matter of, as I said, we're able to enjoy the trails, the library, the thespians, the gardens, and so many of the other activities and committees that are up here. In my time in the past 6 months, I've been able to attend most of the committee meetings. I go to the Communications Committee, the Archives Committee. I'm a liaison to the policy committees, both planning and utilities. And so I'm able to see a lot of where the inner workings of the Sea Ranch are. And it's quite impressive as to what these people are able to accomplish. So, in closing, I just want to say that I really appreciate so much what Sea Ranch has given me, and I want to volunteer my time to give back to the Sea Ranch and pay back a little bit of what I have received. And so, I'm asking for your vote, and I'm always willing to meet and hear any opinions or concerns that you have. I've given of course, my number is in the first candidate statement, my phone number and email. And so I welcome any comments from you. Thank you.
And last but not least, David Skibbins.
I know it's not politically correct, but aren't they great? It's just really kind of inspiring to watch people willing to volunteer and to make those kind of sacrifices for the sake of the ranch. I admire both of you. Well, the last time I was up here performing was not in this room, but was at the barn. And I was in the same time last year, and I was in my underwear. So this is a lot more comfortable. Really glad to be here and fully clothed. I was putting together my comments for this talk, and I realized, well, even for this campaign, I realized 47 years I've been coming up to the Sea Ranch. And that's kind of shocking. But the nice thing about living in this community is that there's still people up here that says, oh, there's a young guy. Can I have the young guy do that? I mean, you're not even 70. You don't even count yet. So that's the nice thing about this community. You never feel too old. I fell in love with the ranch. I mean, all three of us have fallen in love with the ranch. I've just fallen in love with the ranch for a longer period of time than most. Drove up here in my Volkswagen Bug as the rocks were falling down in the middle of a storm, and saw my parents' new house on the bluff. So my parents are Jerry and Sally Skibbins, and when they talk about the pioneers of Sea Ranch, those are the people that they're talking to. And I lived here long enough to be able to have them age in place and to bury their ashes here on the ranch. And that is really important to me and really important to them. They love this place so deeply, and they've inculcated in me that kind of absolute passion for the land and for the people that are crazy enough to love the land as much as they do. We've been really lucky living up here because we've lived all over the ranch. We lived down the bluffs, and we lived for 2 amazing years in the tower condo in Condo 1, which is just a remarkable, I mean, I could talk for 10 minutes about what it's like to live in that building. It was just an incredible, amazing architectural triumph. And we've lived up on the bluffs overlooking the crab boats in the distance, and now we live in a wonderful meadow deep in the redwoods. So it's been a love affair with lots of different phases. My wonderful, beautiful wife, Marla, and I moved up here full-time in 2000. And I wanted to say I never regretted it, but then I remember that time I was coming up the road and there was a cow right in the middle of the road. I had a moment of regret until I got around it. You know, there's a lot about me that's in the brag sheet that's already been handed out, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about my qualifications because, you know, I think everyone up here is highly qualified to be a member of the board. So I thought I'd take my 10 minutes to talk about what I would like to see happen on the board, that I would like to be a part of that change. And I'm not going to start talking about our Central Forest, though, of course, that's one of the inspiring things that got me to run for the board in the first place. But part of my checkered career was as the broker-manager of Prudential California Realty at Pleasant Hill. And I got the opportunity to deeply appreciate real estate and property values and how important they are. And I want the board to have the same kind of deep appreciation for the property values of its members. One of the things that I objected to about the NTMP was that, God, I can actually do those initials now without stumbling over them, that's nice. Was that basically that kind of a laissez-faire ideas about the property values of the 200 people that live in the forest. They just said, well, you know, they'll just have to suck it up. They'll just have to live with it. There'll be a little bit of noise, and they'll just have to live with it. Well, that's not true. I mean, there are people on Schooner that will be near a commercial logging operation almost every time there is a commercial logging operation. So we'll all have to disclose. I live on Sorcerer Wood, and we'll all have to disclose that we're near a logging operation where that to come to pass. I really appreciate that the board suspended resubmitting that. I think it was a brilliant thing that they did because there's certainly much more conversation that needs to happen around that issue. And it's still in the works. It hasn't disappeared. I've heard a number of board members that are kind of looking forward to finding a compromise solution that would include logging in our Central Forest. And I think it's problematic to say the least, but certainly around property values it's problematic. Another thing is the Rule 4.5, which is a really good idea. Here's the thing, everything that the board has done is a really good idea. They wanted to make the resources pay for themselves. And that was a really good idea. I don't believe it's incongruent with the Sea Ranch philosophy, but it was a really good idea. Rule 4.5 is a chance to really get design compliance when you need it. Because when a seller's trying to sell a house, they have to comply if it's a mandatory inspection. So you can really get those things done you need to get done. Really good idea. Speaking as an ex-broker manager, it's a horrendous idea because all of a sudden the Sea Ranch Association is almost a party to the escrows, every single escrow that's going on in the ranch. And if they get their inspection done in a timely manner, that's really great, but sometimes you're doing a 1031 property exchange, or you're doing something. We oftentimes at the ranch have to sell our property in a big hurry because of health concerns or other concerns where we have to make big decisions and get out of the ranch quickly because of what's going on in our family. And were those inspections backed up for a few weeks or months, it could destroy an escrow because no buyer wants to buy land and buy property where they have no idea how much they're going to have to pay once the escrow closes and they're left with the problem. So again, I think there might be some kind of compromise, but I'm concerned about any mandatory inspection that puts the association in the middle of an escrow. That's just speaking as a broker. also, I have a hint. If there's anyone in this room that hasn't signed up for the fiber optic thing and they're worried, they're thinking, well, I'm not going to use it that much, I would strongly urge you to sign up. It's brilliant. It's one of the best things the board's done in years. And this is the time where you can get the equipment laid into your house at a very reasonable price. And that's going to directly impact your property value when you sell the house. Because if you're selling a house on the ranch that isn't hooked into the fiber optic 5, 6 years down the road, that will have a definite negative impact on your property value. That's just a hint, but I just wanted to say that. I buried both my parents in the last 2 years, and didn't know it would affect me like that. But it's made me kind of passionate about aging in place. Because if we didn't get the support and resources that we needed to help both my parents as they aged and died in place here on the ranch, I don't know how we could have handled it. Cheryl Hastings was an angel from above that really came and saved us and our whole family. So what I want is that it's kind of like two bookends. On the one hand, I want the board to be much more responsive to new property owners, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But on the other hand, I want the board to be really responsive to the people that are trying to age in place here. To not only put out information about the resources that are available in the Mendonoma area, but even to help maybe develop some of those resources. So they become a mover and shaker in terms of helping elders in our community. And by the way, in this very room on May 3rd, from 3 to 5, there's going to be an Aging in Place workshop where they're sharing the resources that are available in Mendonoma. I urge everyone to come to it because I think it's kind of crucial that we know what is available, and then we start making noises about what we want to be available, because we don't want to stay here for a long time. I mean, I intend to stay here the whole distance like my parents did. 1 minute. Okay, also RCMS just put out a new list of paid caregivers. If any of you are in the urgent stage, you might want to check that out. Good, I don't have to talk about the Central Forest. I want to talk about this for just a minute. This is not a piece of advertising. This is a heartfelt expression of the deep love that we have for the ranch. And I absolutely believe that any board decision needs to be measured up against these covenants and commitments. And if you think that you are in alignment with them, then listen to the people who don't think that you're in alignment with them. Listen to the members that are writing you emails and saying, I don't agree with you, because they probably have something to teach you. And as a board member, I absolutely seek out your opinion and will listen to it very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you all three for your very succinct remarks and keeping well within the 10 minutes that we allowed for you. One of the things we did a couple of years ago was to go out to the community and ask them for questions, so that we were not the ones who were directing the questions to the board, but to find out what was really on the minds of various members. I did the same thing this year, and unlike many people who have a cell phone in their hand and text an bit of information at the very last minute, anything that came into me in the way of a question after midnight last night is probably not going to be on my list. Coupled with the fact that I have printer trouble and had to have all of the questions printed out. So bear with me while I move pieces of paper about up here. Most of the questions were not directed to an individual member, or were directed to directed to the candidates in general. So I will read them as they are, and then I will ask you, we'll start at one end and go down, and no, we'll start in the middle this time.
There we go.
Finally on number 1.
In the middle this time. The first one is, as a board member, how would you feel closed committees and confidential minutes should be used? In what sort of situations do you feel closed committees are appropriate? Or in any?
Okay. From here.
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. Well, closed committees are certainly appropriate for executive session. When we're dealing with legal issues, contracts, personnel decisions, etc. That's clearly a list, or that's clearly documented in Davis Sterling. The reasons for any other closed sessions, I can't really think of any, quite frankly. I think just about all of the meetings that I've been aware of are open. The exception was, the task was the subcommittee on the MTMG, and that was, I think that was probably technically closed, but I don't know. I was able to get into at least some of their. I got into their when they went on the trails on the plantation tour. And it was just because I asked. That was it. But I know that right now subcommittees of the board are doing closed sessions, and as I've been told, the minutes haven't been made available to the public. I think that should change. I think the minutes should always be the approved minutes, not the draft minutes, but the approved minutes should be published and available to people. And I really don't see much reason to have those meetings closed. I was talking with one of the policy committees, and one of the things that came up was I was asking, well, if you're going to have subcommittees, they're going to have meetings, how do people know when they're going to have the meetings? And so this is something that needs to also get addressed. But I think they've been making advances in being a little more transparent in the fact that they're now publishing agendas and support materials for people who want to go to these meetings, so that they're not coming in cold and having to see if something's put in the back, or in more likely cases not have it at all. So that's pretty much covers it.
David?
Yeah, let's see. Is this on?
Yeah.
No?
I think you have to have it. Oh,
Is this on? Is this better? Ah, great, okay. Obviously, the Davis Sterling requirements in terms of legal issues or personnel issues or issues related to contracts are probably the only times I think that we should be in closed meetings. The meetings for the NTMP were closed. I specifically asked if I could attend and was told no. So I think that ended up, and I think the board regrets that decision, because that ended up creating an unintended distrust on the parts of many of the members, because they didn't know where this plan came from or why it got generated in the way it got generated. In particular, of concern is, was there anything else besides logging that was offered as an alternative in terms of taking care of our central forest? And we don't know. We'll never know. I still can't get the minutes from the early board meetings of the early NTMP meetings. I think it's sort of an indication of a larger problem. The one show and tell that I had was, this is the Sea Ranch Organization Association chart. And above the board and above the community manager are the members. And I think the members need to be on the top of the chart, not shuffled away on the bottom of the chart. The board needs not to serve the community manager, not to serve the association, though certainly to work with those people. But the board's obligation is to serve its membership, and I don't think closed meetings do that.
Nigel?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the legal requirements. Beyond that, generally, I believe things should be open. I will say having from my brief time on the board, it is very difficult as a board member when you're trying to explore a new topic that is sort of wide open and has many possible outcomes in a sort of very stilted public board meeting conversation approach. Nobody wants to float an idea and look like an idiot in front of 50 people in the room, generally speaking. And, you know, the whole motion process and everything else and makes it sometimes difficult to kind of explore issues. It doesn't mean that those meetings should be closed, but I think there's a place for, beyond the kind of large workshop session, the ability to have conversations on issues, whatever that forum might be. But I'm generally for openness, because I think over time is the only way to go, you know, with the obvious exceptions of, you know, staff and legal matters and so on. So that's my view on it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is to all of you as well. The timber management plan for the Central Forest has been suspended, which by definition means temporarily prevented from continuing. If a motion is made to reinstate the NTMP, how would you vote? Let's start with you, Nigel.
Great, I get the good one first.
Hot seat.
Here goes. As the plan is currently, I would not vote for it. And I'll tell you why, because I think it could do with some improvement, and I think we need more discussion on it. So if it came up tomorrow, I would have to vote against it. However, let's be clear, I do believe we need to manage our forest, and I do believe that the NTMP as an overarching permit from CAL FIRE, which recognises the bounds of CEQA and all the other reviews, and Sonoma County Coastal Commission, to have an overarching permit from CAL FIRE that addresses all of those issues, that allows us to do trails maintenance, tree maintenance, whether we thin, whatever we do in there, I think is a good thing. So I think we need further discussion on it. I think we need to understand, given the breadth of the permit and how broad an issue it is, and how broad a document it is, we need an appendix to it that puts in plain language what it's setting out to do. It may not be something CAL FIRE requires, I think it's something our membership requires, or at least would help our membership to understand what the plan is doing. And I also think, quite frankly, we shouldn't do it without putting it in the context of what other internal controls do we as an association want to put around it. Some of the things I've heard when I was out on the trails walk last week was, for example, you know, fear that future boards might say, oh, well, we're short of money this year, let's go cut down some redwoods and sell a few board feet of lumber. I'm not in favour of that, I don't think anybody is. And okay, so we need to put controls, whether it's resolutions, procedures that are internal to the association, that governs how we, in any one given period of cleanup in the forest, how we go about it, how we scope it, how we approve it in an operational manner. That way, the breadth of the NTMP as we see it, I think, is controlled and contained and should remove a lot of the fears that I was hearing. Quite frankly, I floated that idea with one or two people who I know live up in the woods and are opposed to the plan during the walk, and it obviously is perhaps a way to start to open the dialogue and sort of get this sort of under control in a manner that we can all live with. I'll be a little provocative here. When we were on the trail, we got to the little red tape that said, here's the boundaries of the CTPZ, and that over there is not. I thought, well, if that tree is on the wrong side of the tape, we can't touch it. And that's stupid, quite frankly. I think we need to expand the scope to include all of our wooded areas. There's a little provocation for everybody, but I really do. Because, and not because I want to go harvest trees anywhere else, but if we're going to have a sort of permitting document that allows us to do work in our forested areas, where we need to do stewardship as much as we do on the hedgerows and in the commons and in the riparian areas, we need to do stewardship in the woods too. And so why limit it to the CTPZ, which should cover all of our wooded areas that we own? And then we put in place the governance, then we go forth and put that plan up to vote, and that's one I would vote for. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, I'll start again with David. How will you as a board member build trust between the board of directors and TSR owners?
I think the first step in building, well, there is already a lot of trust. I mean, I think one of the things that was so shocking about the logging of our central forest was that we were stunned that the board would even consider doing something like that. I mean, oftentimes I would make with complete disbelief by many of our members, and I'd say, well, read the NTMP, look at what they're actually proposing to do. Because the NTMP was a revenue producing plan. I mean, in our budget, the association was planning to make between $90,000 and $200,000 logging. That's in the budget. That's not somebody's opinion. So I think creating a revenue producing plan by harvesting our commons was shocking for many people that don't believe that that's within the philosophy of the Sea Ranch. I think you reinstate trust, first of all, as the board did, by screeching to a halt and saying, okay, we obviously need to stop going down this road for a while and find out another road that we can go down. But then to really make it an open dialogue, not a workshop where experts are from one side are presenting, but experts are from another side are excluding, but really take a look at, there's 3 forester plans currently on the books that are available, and plus we might want to hire some more. And basically every step of the way, not just with what we're going to do about our central forest, but with anything that powerfully impacts the land, like just about all of vegetation management does, to make it a completely transparent, not just transparent, but actually open communication where we're seeking the opinions of all of the members and then using that information to help make our decisions.
Jim? How would you as a board member build trust?
Well, I think the obvious one is just open communication, and as much communication as you can do. This is something that's difficult because it takes time. It takes members' time to act and to get involved. The NTMG wasn't a surprise to me because I was going to other meetings where it was talked about. Planning committee talked about it. Finance committee came up. I read the statements on from board actions where each meeting there was a report out on the NTMG. So I was quite surprised when the controversy came up because it certainly wasn't a surprise to me. And I think it's something that it needs to be done. I think the communication right now is very good. I think that with soundings, with the board statements being published, well, one of the big things is getting the agenda packet for each board meeting and reading it. It costs $1, and there's a lot of information in those packets about what's going to be coming up and what the board's going to be talking about. And it gives you a heads up so that you can ask intelligent questions. I think the bulletin is another way, and just attending other meetings. What can the board do to develop more trust? You know, you've got info alerts that are going out to everybody who signed up for them. And of course the bulletin and the soundings go out to everyone, so those are key means of communication for building trust. Especially now that when I came here in '93, the bulletin was used, they had letters to the editor. And if you've been here long enough, you'll remember what some of those letters were. And it was really frustrating for those people because people who had opposing views had to wait a month to get their letter published. So it was a slow argument. But, and I don't think that contributed to communication at the Sea Ranch. So getting that out in the bulletin was good. But that was one of the things that people were using it for, was because it went to every member. And so I think we need to read the bulletins and see what's going on.
Nigel?
It's hard to add words of wisdom to what my colleagues have said. I think one of the challenges is, Jim made reference to, minutes and board packets and everything else. The problem is reading that stuff is like, having your teeth pulled is pretty painful and dry at times. Nobody really wants to do it. You know, one possibility is sort of the Coles Notes version of board activity, and what's going on, I don't know. But you know, communications is the thing. I mean, it is open, you know, subject to the prior conversation, and it's available. And if the community was a little sort of asleep or trusting in the board to do the right thing and shout it from the rooftops if it was doing something any different, that's a bit of a high standard. You know, I think the association membership does have an obligation to pay attention and to, you know, to be aware and to be engaged as well, and not devolve it all to the board to do on their behalf. Yes, we're appointed to govern, but the trust needs to work and the communication needs to work both ways. And I think it's been a little shaken. I don't think it's broken. I think a little time will get it back on track again, but we do need to pay attention to it, especially in the short term.
I'm going to do one more question. David, you've already stated your position on this. If you have anything else to add about Rule 4.5? If not, I will ask the other two what their position is on.
No, by all means, let them,
4.5.
go ahead.
Mhm.
Well, my position in 4.5, I think, if I'm paraphrasing David correctly, I think the intention is good. I think the idea of trying to get people who are out of compliance, have been out of compliance, or have been went out of compliance while they owned the property, that it needs to be documented. And it needs to be worked at, or documented so that it can be corrected at some point. If someone's made as I've been told, is if someone's made a somewhat major change in their house that wasn't sent to the design committee, this is not going to, they're not going to be forced to remove it. They're not out there to try and do expensive changes to people who have done something that's been wrong, but it's been wrong for a while. That it would come up that if the house ever gets a major remodel, then it can be corrected. So I think the intent is good. I think the cost is a little bit high. And if I can refer, there was a nice letter from I think it was Barbara Dugan, and she had 9 points that she thought the board should be considering before they go ahead with implementing this. And I think each one of those points should be addressed by the board of directors.
This is an interesting one. I know when we bought our house, we actually paid to have a sort of inspection done. And to our not entire surprise, there were several deviations that were noted, none of which were disclosed by the seller. I think, quite frankly, if we were all very diligent when we sold our houses and did all the disclosures that are required, then people who were buying would know what liabilities they're taking on. Whether the board should be stepping in the middle of the buyer-seller situation, I'm not entirely sure. I'm a little hesitant to be engaged, to sort of take the role of, the sort of nanny state looking after people. But I do believe that as a board, we have an obligation, or as a board member, I would have an obligation to protect the environment that we have here and the rules that we do have in place, because those rules matter. They're here for a reason. And they do govern and control us in a way that some of us might bridle at occasionally, but we sign off on them when we bought here, and they're the covenant that binds us and keeps what we have. Whether Rule 4.5 is a little heavy-handed, I haven't quite decided yet, quite frankly, whether we need something with a slightly lighter touch, but I do think we have to protect the boundaries that we have in place, and where deviations are out there, I think we need to sort of reel them back in and get them back in the box. Clearly, at the time of selling a home, it's a highly leveraged opportunity to do that. I'm in favour, I think, of some control. Whether it's as written, I need to give a little more thought.
Thank you very much. At this point, I still do have some questions which have been forwarded to us, but we're going to take a break here now for about 10 minutes. So if you would come back at 4:15, we will continue on with a few of those, but then also open the floor to questions from all of you in the audience. We still have a few questions that I have not had an opportunity to read, but since all of you made the effort to come here this afternoon, I'm going to give you as much time as you need to ask the questions that you specifically want to hear addressed by these candidates. So I'm going to ask that you keep your question either directed to everybody or directed to one person specifically, but state what it is, who you wish to answer. And then that you make sure that you keep your question to just about a minute, so that they will each have 2 minutes to answer each one of your questions, so that we can get through anything that's bothering you. Please be cognizant of the time and don't use this as an opportunity to state your position, but rather to find out theirs. So, have at it.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say. Somebody's getting up. No, she's going for a cookie.
There is a question
I don't agree.
that.
Please come up to the mic and state your name and ask the question so that we can all hear it.
Okay, I usually wind this up, but I'll be first this time. I'm Vivian Tyler, unit 24, 123. I'm very aware of the difficulties and the problems around communication, and we've heard a lot about how the board has failed to communicate. I would like to hear each of the people talk about the responsibilities of the membership. Communication has got two sides always. You have no communication if there isn't someone listening. You have no communication if nobody's reading. So I'd like to hear about the members' responsibility on this communication issue.
Why don't we start with Jim on this one?
Well, I think I kind of addressed this a little bit before in saying that there is a lot published that is available to the members, sent, the bulletin and the soundings being sent to the homes. The info alert, I don't know how well the info alert is subscribed. If that's a lot of people or not very many. But that's certainly a way to get communication in front of people quickly, and to get so that they can respond in a timely manner. And I think in excess, I think it's difficult for people to make committee meetings because those are on the weekends. Those are times when you should be enjoying Sea Ranch instead of having to be in on the governing of it. But at the same time, those minutes are published on the webpage, and so you can go and read the minutes of the different committees, in particular the policy committees, which are coming out with recommendations to the board on upcoming events. And I think that would help quite a bit. But like I said, I can understand that people have a lot of other things that they need to do in their lives too. They're not as foolish as us to dedicate the rest of our lives, or next 3 years, to governing Sea Ranch.
Nigel?
I think Debbie is absolutely right in the sort of direction of her question. I think that the membership absolutely has an obligation to be a part of the process and needs to listen and needs to not just listen because it's not a lecture, I don't mean it like that, but needs to pay attention to what's going on and then provide feedback to whether it's a policy committee or the board or whoever, provide some feedback either in sort of public sessions or one-on-one conversation on the issues and what concerns you. if we don't hear from the membership, then we're governing in a vacuum, and that doesn't work either. And we get this disconnect between the membership and the board. And yes, we're going through the motions of approving the budget and doing what we think is important, but the board is not omniscient. What's important is what the membership wants is important. And if we don't hear it from you, we can't do anything about it. So absolutely.
I'm a member of the TSR listserv and the TSR buzz, and gosh, I hear a lot about members and what they think and feel. If anybody wants to know what the members are feeling, please just log on and you can find out. It's kind of like, the soundings used to have the letters to the editor. Now we can do it instantly, so it makes it very interesting, lively, and amusing. I don't think the membership is to blame if they're not readily and completely informed by the board about a particular policy. I'd like to give you an example of a time when I think the system worked really well, which is there was the lot split, lot consolidation issue. And I heard that they were going to charge $10,000 for this fee, and I got all up in it. And luckily, I was on the TSR list, and they said, will you read what Frank Bell actually said? So I had to dig a little bit, but I found it finally on the website. And Frank Bell had presented a very clear, cogent argument with both sides, arguing why it was not such a good idea, why he thought it was a good idea, giving a really full and complete history of it. By the time I was through, he completely convinced me that it was the right thing to do. That's the example of how it's supposed to work. But that's because all of the information was presented. The reason why this has come up is because in the login of our central forest, it was never clearly presented at the onset when we were talking about Rule 7.3 that we were talking about taking down 30 to 40% of the trees over 18 inches in diameter. And had that been on the forefront of the conversation, I don't think this whole conversation would have blown up. There you go.
Jody Sparks, is this on? Jody Sparks, 2724. Well, what happened with the CPTZ happened. And it's set aside right now. And a lot of things could have been different on all sides. But what I would like to ask you is, would you agree that in the future, no matter what the issue is, if it seems like it could impact a lot of people, maybe one of the first steps that the board needs to look at is preparing a public participation plan of sorts. And the reason I say that is many people in the community participated in the Commons Landscape Committee, of which Dibby and Donlin were instrumental in making it work. And it was this incredible process to go through, because you'd have all these people from very different opinions and perspectives sitting around a room talking about this swath of land, and having, one side of the table saying, I love the fir trees, the other side, I want those damn things cut down. But they had to hear, they had to see it from the other person's perspective. And it was just, I just think it is an incredible process. And maybe that process that they showed us was something we should look at. How do you feel about a public participation process be initiated to find out how can we reach out and get the most people when there's something that's confidential? Do you think that would be a good idea or a waste of time? Thank you.
Yes, it would be a good idea. Short and to the point. No, I think sometimes when you're starting out with a brand new issue, and you know it's an issue from the outset, or it could be, I think that it's clearly a good way to go, because we do need community input, as I said a couple of moments ago, about the obligation of the membership almost to tell us what they think. At the same time, I think in the particular case of recent history, I think we had a bit of a situation of the sort of the boiling of the frog, and it took place over a long period of time when we got to the end state without stopping to think about some of those impacts, because we've been at it for so long. And I think, so, lesson learned, wisdom of hindsight, going forward, we need to kind of remember those sorts of situations and get the participation, because when, this membership is a very smart membership. There's lots of bright people here with lots of good ideas. I don't say that to flatter you all. I mean, it is. I'm impressed with the knowledge that's available to us here. And, we can solve any problem we put our minds to. So, participation is good, I agree.
Jim?
I think in some cases that maybe something may be more important to the membership than the board realizes. I mean, there are some issues that you'd say, well, do we really need to have a group meeting on this? I don't know. Let's take the drone issue. The board's pretty much going on that by recommendations from the community manager and that. But is that something that we should, something that we should be letting out for the whole membership and have special meetings on? Is it that important? I don't know. Obviously, when something's going to be costly and affect, particularly it's going to affect our assessments significantly, it does need to be brought out and communicated and other opinions brought into play. That would probably require special workshops where there's a lot more membership participation rather than top-down communication. And in those cases, I think some of those things are going to be coming up in the near future. After the seismic study, if we have to do significant spending to rehabilitate the buildings, I think that's something we all want to get involved in.
Yeah, I think the CLC model is a really great model. It was really exciting to go to that meeting and just sit down with people from all over the ranch and have the whole map of the ranch out there and begin to talk about it. I think that's membership from the bottom up, which is, I think, the best of the Sea Ranch. When the members are an active part of sharing, discussing, hashing out what needs to be done, and then that ultimately puts up to the board rather than top down, where decisions are made by a few people and then imposed on many. So I think it's a brilliant example of using that structure.
While we're on the subject of the CLC, I should just mention that in June, the CLC will be doing a presentation at the forum, so keep that in mind and you can come and see how it really does work. All right, question.
Yeah, I'm Thayer Walker, 14314 East Ridge Road. I have to confess I have a bias here. I never expected to walk into this meeting today and hear public versus private meetings or non-public meetings as a significant issue. Been talking about this now since 2009, 2010, and I expected I was going to be a lonely voice. So I want to thank you very much for talking about this and bringing it out. And what I hear from the panelists is very encouraging. Nigel, I was a reporter for in and out of journalism for about 50 years. I attended an awful lot of government meetings. I heard an awful lot of stupid things, really dumb things. If I had written them down and made a book, I'd probably be a wealthy man. Let me just say that that's a way to get bad ideas out of the way. Anything almost always, in my experience, a public meeting has produced a better result than a private meeting. It has been less decorous, It has been sometimes brawling, but by and large, the result is usually, I won't say always, but usually better. I think Jim has probably dealt with the Brown Act and the Public Records Act extensively. I know that I had to file somewhere between 25 and 35 Freedom of Information Act requests in my career. Was never denied one, and in all cases when I published what was going on, the level of discourse improved and almost universally. That brings me to the question about that I have for you, and that is, would you support an intensive and good faith effort to adopt the principles of the Brown Act here? We don't have to become a city, but to adopt the principles of the Brown Act here, and also the California Public Records Act. Neither of these things are particularly onerous. The new fire district that we've just formed is going to have to sit and deal with the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. I'm sure they're going to have stumbles and stuff, but they'll get it right. CLSD already operates under those strictures. So it's not a big deal. But my guess is that you would not have the NTMP problem that you have if that had been. I went through the records, and maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I could not find a single place in the Sea Ranch archives where the meeting of the subcommittee was noticed. I could not find a single incident in which a meeting of the subcommittee was the location published and the time published, or an agenda published. I did find that there were references to minutes, but those minutes went to the board members and to the association administration. General membership couldn't get them. My guess is, and I can't prove it, but if that had been a public process with public invitations and participation, you would have a different result. We wouldn't be talking about the NTMP as we are here today. So what I'd like to hear from you is whether or not you would support this. And I'm not talking about, yes, that's really a good idea, we'll study it. I'm talking about a good faith effort to set up a committee to investigate the pros, cons, and how would we be affected by it, and whether or not it's a good idea. I think it's time. Thank you. We hear one other thing. We hear Frank say, we hear other people say from the Finance Committee, that we're essentially a small city. We have roads, we have security, we have planning, we have commons, we have facilities, we have all of those kinds of things. But we don't function under the strictures of a small city would function under. It's not a big deal, but it would make a world of difference, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David, do you want to start?
Yes, I would absolutely support creating a subcommittee to take a look at implementing that. I think it's a really good idea. I think we need to start acting more like a town and less like a small group of folks that are trying to make all the decisions. And I think the Brown Act creates sort of the kind of the insurance that we've been talking about, of making sure it's a bottom-up organization, not a top-down organization. So absolutely, I'm on your side.
Thank you. I made a living in television for a long time with a microphone. You never know it.
Nigel, would you like to discuss? Would you like to?
Yeah. I haven't read the Brown Act, so I don't understand all the implications of it, although I do live in the city of Berkeley that's constantly, if there's an extreme example of the Brown Act being implemented and beyond, it's there. In theory and in principle, I'm fine with looking at it and what it means and understanding it. I would, although we are the size of a small town, we are a community and we are a common interest development, we have a slightly different legal construct, and we are governed by David Sterling. Provided those two were not in conflict, I would be fine with it.
Well, I'm certainly all for open meetings. This gives me a chance to make the statement that I didn't get to make before, and that was all of our organizational committee meetings are noticed as being open meetings, and people are welcome to come. And as I attend these meetings, I realize that I'm a guest at their meeting, and so it's my responsibility, I think, to listen and learn and not push myself into the meeting unless I'm asked to. And so I think that would go for any other meetings, board and subcommittee meetings. I'd like to see them be open and have people come and listen, but they also need to be, I think, respectful of the people who are actually having the meeting so that they can accomplish the goals that have been set before. As far as the differences, I don't know what the differences are between the Brown Act and Davis-Sterling. So I think setting up a committee to investigate it would be good, because I can't think of anything that I would be against, but like I said, I don't really know all the details, so having a committee go through that, I think would be very positive.
Thank you. Mel?
Mel Hurst, 1976. I wasn't going to get up here, but something's been bugging me since the first meeting I ever attended, any board meeting, and I haven't done anything about it. I was going to say something, but you hit on a little bit, and that is, turnout at board meetings. 1/3 of Sea Ranch are part-timers. 1/3 are full-timers. A lot retired, and they do a hell of a lot of travel. I don't recall a single time we've gotten more than a 7-day notice on what a board meeting is going to be about. I believe Davis-Sterling says it must be a 7-day notice. Why in the world aren't we giving more notice when it's possible? My suggestion, and I'm interested in what you might have to comment about it, that we give out a notice what the board meeting is going to be about, let's say 2 weeks, with the reservation that if something needs to be added, we hit that at the 7-day. Anyway, I'd be interested in your response.
My response is going to be even broader than that, which is with our new fiber optic system, I would love us to be streaming board meetings so that people that can't make the meeting could actually be able to watch at the same time. I would love for us to have a Facebook page where, as the board agenda changed, it could be changed in the moment there on the page, and people could find out exactly what the agenda was that was going on, and could also have links to the information packet. So that whether they come to the board meeting or not, I mean, you can get that. You have to, write Ellen, she'll send you the info packet. I mean, I'm glad that that exists, but I think that we need to have that information readily available to all the members, and we need to start thinking about members that use social media and use information systems that we are just beginning to use, like Facebook and Twitter and blogging and info, and all of the stuff that we're just beginning to catch up on. As we're attracting more and more younger people, if we want them to be active and engaged members of our community, we need to be speaking in their language, in their media too.
Well, I hate to admit this, but when I was on the board, I usually procrastinated to the last minute to get stuff in so that it would get into the board agenda in the packet. If you set the meeting, or if you set it up 2 weeks ahead of time, I would meet the 2 weeks. It was just my nature. But I know there's logistics problems in getting the board packet put together, get it complete, get it printed, because a lot of times it's really thick. It can be a lot of pages, and it's difficult to predict how many people want it. At one time, and I haven't seen this lately, but at one time, for $3, they would mail it to you, and you could subscribe to it, actually, and have the board packet sent to you. But I don't think that would really help you too much, because by the time it gets to you, you're only gonna be a couple of days away from the board meeting. I think it's something that we could certainly talk about to see what it would take for us to do it 2 weeks ahead of time, to get it up online, and then maybe have some modification. I'd hate to say, okay, and then something could be added at 7 days, because then something would always be added at 7 days. So you either do it, it's gonna be done 2 weeks ahead of time, or you stay with what we have now.
I think there's a couple of things here. First off, when the board meetings occur, obviously are well calendared, so we know when they're going to happen, unless it's some extraordinary meeting that's done at fairly short notice. What I'm hearing is knowing whether it's worth being here or not on that particular weekend to pay attention. Whether, and I need to think this through, I would have to sort of, and I don't know all the legal implications, but it might be possible to at least publish a draft agenda 2 weeks out, so that directionally you know what might be on it. Wouldn't be a full board packet necessarily, but at least from the topics, you know, you could see what's coming, to be finalised on a normal sort of 7-day schedule for, you know, data sterling, etc. So I think there's a couple of things that we could consider, but if you set it too far out, then it just sometimes changes the ability to respond to how things are going on the overall calendar. And I'm a part-timer. I mean, I sort of have some of the same issues, trying to be here when there's things I want to do. I get the problem. Driving off the calendar in the first instance is what I start with, and then figure it out from there.
Could I follow?
It is short.
The other thing that amazes me along this subject is some of the packets are very full, a lot of information. And for the life of me, on a lot of issues, they're not that simple. And for the life of me, I can't imagine that all 7 board members have the time to really study the issue and get a lot of questions answered. And that's one of my major disappointments of dealing issues. They get a 7-day notice, and they've got a life to lead, and et cetera. So, do you guys have any thoughts on that? And I'm going to sit down.
Lee?
Yeah, just to respond to that, yeah, being a fast study is a challenge. There's a lot to read at times, I agree.
Yeah, I would add that I'm a part-timer, but fortunately I was able to retire, and so I am able to get up here every weekend. And not every board member has that luxury yet. So I really don't have any problem with the 7 days at this point, but I certainly wouldn't object to having 14 days.
I'm looking forward to reams and reams of very detailed information about which I understand about 1/3, and then desperately trying to find out what the heck this all means. Yeah, it's quite a challenge being a board member. It's definitely not for the weak-eyed or frail, but that's what we're here to do. And if we're not willing to make that effort, then we do a detriment to our members.
Just as a comment, I'm not sure if being a board member and retired are exactly the same thing.
Yeah, really. Part-time job.
That part's true. Lee Miller, 1327. The Brown Act specifically provides for ad hoc committees composed of less than a majority of the board. They're exempted from public meeting requirements. They're exempted from public participation. They're exempted from the requirement to keep minutes. Generally, they're a work group designed to allow some dialogue and some flexibility for members to get work done. Davis Sterling has been called the Brown Act light. It makes essentially exactly the same provisions, except the Brown Act is a whole lot clunkier. It's not user-friendly, it's not even particularly public-friendly, but it does very explicitly preserve the right of the public to hear and so on, within the realm of what's allowed. They have something like 14 or 15 reasons you can meet in closed session. Having said that, it amazes me that we're talking about some kind of a universal solution to what's essentially a problem relating to the NTMP. It seems to me, rather than spending your time investigating the Brown Act, which I don't think most people are thrilled with working with, it's onerous, but it does start in the government code with the premise of public rights. Davis Sterling's in the corporation code. It's a different beast for a different reason. So, having said that, what do you think about taking the energy that I think would be wasted there, discovering what an unattractive proposition it is, and solve the real issue, which is how to get on with another look at the CTPZ and examining solutions between doing nothing, including letting the erosion continue, or cutting down trees for revenue, and look at what you need in the way of a public process, which is clearly what people want, to look at the alternatives. If we don't do any logging, what are we going to do? There are mitigation things required. They're going to require some money. When you're done, how are you going to let the audience of the Sea Ranch that isn't attending to any of this right now, but will as soon as you start saying, gosh, guys, for $14 a month, an increase in dues, we don't have to do any logging. There'll be another kind of controversy. But in the meantime, I'm asking basically, why not just spend the energy on this question, looking at an open member participation kind of process to sort out what we might want to do, what makes sense, what it will cost, what are the alternatives.
I would actually beg to differ with you for one moment, Lee, on what you said, mainly because I think we've learned some lessons from what's occurred with the NTMP. I think it's worth doing a little internal navel gazing to figure out how to avoid those sort of issues going forward. I would happily not study the Brown Act, thank you very much. I'm quite fine. But I do think there are some things that we should learn from it. What we do next, and again, this is my opinion, I think a brief pause is a good thing. I think right now, basically, we would have, even if we were going to go ahead and get the plan through CAL FIRE and everything else, we wouldn't at the earliest be looking to deploy or use it until next year. So I think we have a little time. I think we should take that time, take a deep breath, quite frankly, let the emotions calm down a little bit, and then get together and figure out how we embrace public input from the whole of the association, and how we go about determining the best path forward, including evaluating and costing all the options, and understanding whether an entirely deep clean fuel load only program, which would cost X dollars an acre to execute, whether we want to have the stomach to pay for that, whether we want to do some actual forest restoration, or what it is our objectives in the forested areas are. I actually don't think we have a common set of objectives at the moment. I think if we can get agreed on a set of objectives of what we really want to do with it, and whether we want to have thought leadership on the coast, a little like Arcada's doing, and saying this is what you can do with a nice how to create a redwood area, or whether we just want to let nature do its thing. We have no agreement at this time. I think if we can get that alignment, how we then execute it becomes fairly easy. I think that's where we need to focus first.
Jim?
In my own clumsy way, that's exactly what I was suggesting. Spend the time on that, not Brown Act and that kind of thing.
But that I agree with.
Jim or David?
Well, thank you for the information on the Brown Act. It actually surprised me. I didn't realize that they were much more restrictive as far as closed meetings were. Not, did I misunderstand you?
not more restrictive than the Brown Act.
No, that's what I said.
Saying.
That's what I was going to say.
Subcommittee issue that is really where all of this came from.
Right, from David Sterling, I only saw that the board meetings had to be open meetings. So I don't know if David Sterling went further than that, and you seem to be indicating, that Brown Act doesn't go any further than that. In fact, it's more restrictive. I've been, I think it's all of us probably in this room that have been deluged with many sources of information. I know personally I've read the letter of demand from Arthur Kuhn. I've read the letter from Sharon Dugan on the taxation issues of the TPZ and what permits would be needed for doing minor work. I read the response from CAL FIRE by Peter Luzinger. I've read Ray Moritz from Urban Forestry Association. I read his report. I read Jeff Robin from Fine Tree Care. I went on the Trails Committee walk with Eric Agnew. I was here for the workshop with Joe McBride and Greg Giusti and Mark Andre and Matt Green. And I watched an 85-minute video by Stephen Pine on fire slow, fire fast, fire deep, which pretty much indicated that the National Forest Service has been wrong for the last 100 years in how they treat forests. So after having all that information, I don't know.
David, maybe you can clarify. We've got about 1 minute yet,
Okay.
and then we still have one more question before the closing statements.
I think the issue, the short-term issue is definitely how we're going to deal with our central forest. And if you take a look at the Brown Act, that's going to be a long-range issue thing to consider.
Okay. Do you have a question?
My name is Janet Carucci, 2189, and this has nothing to do with NTMP, TZP, ABC, or XYZ. I will celebrate my first anniversary here as a homeowner with my husband Adrian in 2 days. So I'm a newbie. So my question is out of total ignorance. My guess is that the level of passion about being an owner at Sea Ranch may have something to do with whether one is a full-time member here, a part-time member, or perhaps even an absentee owner who only looks at it as rental income that feathers one's nest. So my question has to do with this, and I have no idea if the board, the association, under whose governance this question has to do with, but if the question should ever come up to the board, do you think there should be a quote-unquote cap on vacation rental homes? Should it be decreased? Should it be eliminated? I'm just really curious about what your positions might be on the whole discussion of vacation rental homes.
I don't think our CCNRs would allow us to limit vacation homes. It says in there, I think, that this is open to the owners, their guests, and I think it explicitly states that the people are allowed to rent out their homes. I think that's probably back to when, at the beginning of Sea Ranch, when this was going to be considered a vacation area, rather than having people come in full-time. As far as the passion about Sea Ranch is concerned, I think all people who are here are obviously passionate. Probably, I know being part-time, I'm very passionate about Sea Ranch. And I know lot owners who are passionate about Sea Ranch, even though they don't get to come up here very often. But people have a lot here and they're paying the dues just like all of us. because I think someday they do want to be able to come up here and build and live here, and not just for rental income. So that's pretty much my response.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can cap it. I think our demographics are an interesting issue, how they've evolved over time. And as Jim remarked, I mean, a lot of the early premise of the Sea Ranch was as a place to come and stay for a rental short-term, either rental or own, but not as a full-time residence. And at the other end of the spectrum from this, quite frankly, is the whole question of ageing in place. I don't think equally we want to become a retirement community. We need to find that balance of sort of age, sort of reasons why we're here, and all of those things. But it's not something the board directly can control. I don't believe, there are no rules that give us the right to say what people can do or can't do. I think it's of concern to us all, but I think that we need to watch it and how that sort of drives what we do. But I do think we need to, so way off the rails there. It's been a long afternoon. I do think that renters have, it's good things, they bring value to the local economy, because there's money that goes into the local community in Gualala, and there's house cleaners who clean behind the renters. There's a whole bunch of money that goes into the local economy, which is a good thing. It makes our facilities used, which I think is a good thing, and it adds some life and vibrancy to the community. I think sometimes we need the renters to follow the rules a little better. That's probably a good thing to put some attention into. But by and large, I don't think we should artificially try and distort the nature of the community that we have.
Yeah, the ranch is going to grow the way the ranch is going to grow. And interestingly enough, every year more and more of us become full-timers or long-term renters. And actually, the poor long-term renters, I was a long-term renter for many years, poor long-term renters are the most disadvantaged because no one, they sort of live off on the side. Right? It's like they don't get a voice in the governance, and that's proper because they don't pay dues. But there's a way where it would be nice to know if they had any concerns also. We recently, thank you very much, board of directors and everyone that was involved, dealt with the whole issue around the apartment complex that was a difficult burden for us to unload, and I think we're changing all the time. I don't think you can ever put your finger down and say this is what when my mom came up here, there were 7 people on the ranch, it changes constantly. She would go to the local bar and find out who was sleeping with whom, because evidently it was a lot more energetic in those days than it is these days, or we just got older. But again, it has a life of its own, and the job of the board is to pay attention to how that life is changing and evolving.
Well, I appreciate your responses. My husband and I could not have purchased something had we not been able to use it as a vacation rental initially until we could make the transition here.
Exactly.
So it was just a curiosity on my part. Thank you very much.
If nobody else seems to be lined up to have a question at this point, I'm going to move to the closing statements. And in the drawing that we did beforehand, David will go first, followed by Jim, and then Nigel. You have about two or 3 minutes for your closing statement.
It's an honor to be here. This is the first candidates forum I've ever attended. I always went to my folks and said, who should I vote for? And they would tell me. Because they'd attended the candidates forum and because they had their fingers in the pie for many years. You have a tough job to decide who to vote for. Because, 3 of us gentlemen up here, I think all of us care a lot about the ranch. All of us want to do the best. We have different opinions about a few issues, but very similar opinions about a lot of other issues too. And certainly, I think our devotion to what's best for the members and what's best for the land is very strong. I'm the new kid on the block. I don't have a long history of going to committee meetings and contributing and being chairs of committees. That hasn't been the way that I've been on the ranch. I've been on the ranch as a participant, as an actor, in the archive committees, in the library committee. But I also have been on the ranch as a passionate member. And I am one of those passionate members in terms of the ranch. And I would hope to bring a little diversity to the board. Because I believe that the best decisions, somebody was talking about the best decisions come out of public meetings. I believe the best decisions come out of respectful disagreements. And I think it's important that if you have a board that sort of heads in one direction all the time, you really don't get the best decisions out of it. You get the best decisions about a board that's a little bit contentious, all of whom recognizing that we all love the board, but each of whom coming from a very different position about what's the right thing to do. Out of that comes the best decisions for the future of the Sea Ranch. And I would certainly represent myself as one who's willing to have an interesting and divergent opinion. Thank you.
Jim?
I really thank you all for coming here today and asking some really good questions and making us think off our feet actually, but in our chairs. I want to thank the election committee, especially in the forum committee, and as I said, everyone here. I really liked being on the board in 2001 through 4, working with some great people, and I'm looking forward to having that happen again. So my comments to you would be, please, hope you support me, and that's about it. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention one thing I forgot to comment on in my opening remarks. Sort of part of who I am. I do work full-time still, so all this talk of retirement makes me kind of jealous, but that's the way it goes. And I mention that because it's come up before as a question of can you work full-time and be a board member? And it's challenging, I'll be quite candid. But I've had the chance to do it since last September. I can make it work. And the nice thing is, I'm not tied behind a desk. I can work from anywhere. So bring on Sea Ranch Connect. I can't just wait to get some bandwidth so I can really work from up here as opposed to occasional blips mid-conference and the whole thing goes down. Anyway, thanks for coming out this afternoon. It's the sun's now shining at least. Clearly, you've got 3 candidates here. 2 have to be picked. We've got different points of view, but that's healthy, that's good. If we all thought the same way, life would be very boring, and we'd all go off like lemmings and run over the same cliff, which isn't a good idea either, so diversity is good. 1 or 2 folks who've had to deal with me over the last few months know that I tend to come at questions or issues with a couple of key questions, and I would continue to use these, so they might need to be prepared for that. The first question is, when an issue comes up, what problem are we trying to solve? We often seem to find ourselves trying to solve an issue without really knowing how we got there and what the real problem is. And getting back to the basics of what's the problem, I think, is always key. And even when you've got to realise what the problem is, the next question is, and do we care? So problems don't need to be solved. We can get ourselves so wrapped around the axle on things at times, we really need to pay attention to the big stuff. And that gets back to my opening comments about being strategic in our thinking as a board and doing the big picture long-term stuff and governing us so that for the next 50 years from now we're still here having these kind of conversations. This building will be seismically proof and will be still standing and all those other good things. So in closing, thank you to the Forum Committee for putting this on. It's great to have the opportunity. And whatever else you do, whichever ones of us you vote for, at least get out and vote, because I don't want to stand up here and do this again. Thank you.
I would like to thank all of you for coming and participating, and in absentia, I appreciate all the questions that came in from others. There's still probably some cookies and coffee in the background, so if you want to spend a little time and talk to these guys one-on-one, we welcome you to do that. And I particularly want to thank David for working the camera over here, and if you want a CD, call Walt in about a week, and he will have them ready for you. So thank you for coming. If you want to take a chair to the back, it would be appreciated when you go. But if you want to have room to hang out back there and talk to one another and have coffee, please do that first.